Hello and welcome to the first panel in a series of panels for the MSA 2020 online panel discussion series. Tonight, you're all joining us for the online sculpture classroom. I'm very excited to be here with you. I'm Kristen Turdella-Williams. I'm the Vice President of MSA. MSA is the Mid-South Sculpture Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization formed in 2006 to advance the creation and awareness of sculpture in its many and varied forms. We also promote a supportive environment for sculpture and sculptors. We seek to advance the understanding that sculpture educates, affects social change, engages artists, arts professionals, and the community in dialogue. Please consider joining MSA as a member. We have often conferences, confabs, we have keynote speakers who are amazing. We're a really wonderful community, and we'd love to have you join us. This is the first in a series of panels, so stay tuned for more and follow us on social media for future announcements. Panels will be archived on the MSA YouTube channel for future access. I will be the question asker through the chat. If you have any questions at the end during our Q&A session, you can comment on Facebook and I will ask them on your behalf in the Zoom window. We may not be able to respond to everybody's questions today, but we'll do our best to get back to you via email or Facebook. And so now it's my honor to pass it over to the moderator, Leticia Bajuyo.
Greetings. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. First, though, before any of this can happen, this can only be underway thanks to 4 people who are in the background or who are going to be supporting all of this going on, making this feasible. Big thanks to Stephanie Loggins, to Bags McKelvey, Melissa Yes, and especially Stacy Holloway. This was an idea. Just a few weeks ago, we were just getting this going from a board meeting, and it turned into everything that you're having tonight. So thank you to those 4 people who are helping make sure that everything up front is working perfectly. Our first speaker tonight is David Marquez. He is an assistant professor at Western Kentucky University. And in addition to all of his work for the board of the Sculpture Trails Outdoor Museum and the steering committee of the National Conference on Contemporary Cast Iron and Practices, he's preparing for face-to-face this coming fall with backup plans for multi-level stacked courses throughout this fall term. And he's been an absolute inspiration on all of the work he has done ever since March to be able to foster a sharing and support for all of us as we've gone online all of a sudden in March. He's continued to foster that and encouragement. And so thank you so much, David, for all you do. Look forward to your talk tonight.
All right, first off, I'd like to just thank MSA and thank you, Leticia, for such a great introduction. I'm just gonna go straight into it. Let's see. For the past 10 years, I've incorporated the use of my website, YouTube, and Google Apps to assist my students in and out of class. In some ways, I've been teaching in a hybrid format for a while now. The use of these media resources assists with the difficult schedules and the variety of learning styles of our students. Its use saves a lot of time and student frustrations as they have I have 24/7 access as long as they have a device and the internet. The evolution of our smartphones to carry the internet has been a benefit to our students. Media interface applications allow our students to access their course material from their pockets. My efforts have come in handy in the past years and have definitely been a valuable resource during the past semester and in the preparation of the past month. In this presentation, I'll go over some basic or not so basic tools and strategies that can be used in all 3 modalities, traditional studio formats, online delivery. And I got a lag, sorry. But first, let's speak on access and hybrid projects. Some difficulties that we all face is student access to the internet and even digital devices to gain access to our course content. Our students come from many backgrounds. We have infrastructure in many of our rural areas, make getting digital content to our students an additional hurdle. Internet access and economic disparities are major contributors. Some of our workarounds include loaning devices to students, internet and software providers. They contributed access to students last semester. Will they do this again and for how long? Some students and teachers relied on local establishments to gain internet access. Store and restaurant parking lots became popular hotspots. Some schools located hotspots for internet access. Some universities created parking lot hotspots for our students. Always the best solution, yet we persevere. Hybrid projects. Flexibility is a priority in considering what types of projects to develop for studio sculpture courses that may be quickly flipped to home-based studio projects that lack the physical space and resources found in our traditional academic studios. Space, tools, equipment, and even materials are sometimes a struggle. If we are fully online, we rely heavily on the student to acquire their own materials and tools, which can be a challenge if they are unable to find a resource to get them in a timely manner or just can't afford them. Projects versus materials. Some projects allow a lot of flexibility with materials and tools. Below are project ideas that do not rely so heavily on raw materials and can fit many course levels. Found object and assemblage concepts, action-based or conceptually driven projects, performance and time-based projects, including installation and land art. When requiring material for a project, consider the availability and the cost to our students. Also, help your students plan for home-based projects. Inform them on using materials and safe practices in a home-based studio. Remind them of potential material issues and other hazards. Material and tool safety is very important as students may have a variety of family members in their home. All these hazards can be major shifts, and yes, there is a potential loss in some of our traditional practices and experiences we love to teach. On sharing, currently I make each course curriculum digital files available to my students on the cloud. I have been using Google Drive as a primary access point for my students, yet I did give Google Classroom a try this past semester and will be working with our university's Blackboard system this coming semester. Google Drive, YouTube demonstrations, and other media information are accessible on the web all the time, which makes these tools very versatile, perfect for asynchronous teaching methods. My curriculum has revolved around sharing individual course folders and content through Google Drive. I've been making changes and improvements as projects and media formats evolve. Students may easily download the course folder to their computer. This allows them quicker access if they do not have the available or stable internet service. For each course, students are given access to assignments, slideshows, links to articles and videos, and additional project-related content. I use Google Docs and Google Slides primarily, but PDFs and Word docs are easily hosted in the folders for the projects. I use my system as a tool to develop professional practices. Students create their individual accounts and create a folder for my course. They share their course folder with me, where I view, grade, and contribute feedback to their efforts. Note, I'm only able to see what they place in the folder or if they share a file to me individually. The student has full ownership of their content. Documentation and organization practice are a component of each of my course projects, from basic 3D design to senior level portfolio courses. During the course, they share their professional documentation practices with me for grading. I include professional practice and documentation exercises in each of my projects. My goal is for them to leave my curriculum with images and documentation of their research and the practice of organizing their portfolios. Practice makes perfect. Professional practices are very important for our future artists to learn and develop. These practices are very easily included in all class modalities. Documentation and organization practices, if continued throughout their career, can gain them many benefits. These practices have application in writing for scholarships, grants, exhibitions, curatorial practices, and potentially graduate school. Practices include documentation, photographing work, logging artwork information, creating image sheets, writing artist statements. These assignments can be critiqued in class and easily developed into online formats. The objectives, the exercises develop and strengthen concepts, documentation and photography skills, oral translation and articulation, confidence in writing and speaking, student participation, breaking the ice when students have not truly expressed their ideas. Once oriented to the expectations of the exercises, students will use the documentation critiques to support each other in giving constructive feedback as they do in traditional project critiques. Video can be a good resource to introduce project techniques. Demonstration can be given in whole or in part depending on length. I like to keep videos between 15 and 20 minutes. Sometimes it can be tricky for some of us to keep our students focused and engaged beyond that time. Note, it couldn't hurt to find some resources online for creating video demos for art students. One source I found during a quick search gives the advice to strengthen demonstrations. Break the task down into steps, demonstrate twice, remind students of the steps, leave out extraneous information to reduce cognitive overload. Video editing, yeah, it's daunting. Editing does take some knowledge of digital video software, but some are quite intuitive. I use my phone on a tripod to record content, then I use iMovie to edit. Time-lapse video can be used to shorten video lengths. I add captions to assist with accommodation compliance. I use transitions in sections where individual clips are spliced. Communication is of major importance. I use several during our online shift: Zoom, email, text messaging, Slack, phone calls, video chats. All of these assisted in keeping students engaged and informed. I will continue these efforts, probably streamlined to email, Zoom, and phone use for the next semester. Of course, Zoom is our go-to for most class meetings. I think most of us should have the basics under our belt. So let's speak to individual meetings through video chats. Individual meetings can be a valuable asset. We all have a few students that do not speak up in class sessions. I have personally had a few that really changed gear in a positive direction and grew once we went to online formats. And yes, there were a few that fell behind. Zoom, Google Chat, FaceTime, a simple phone call, text messaging, and similar tools can be used for individual conversations and critiques with your students. One strategy is to schedule individual time with each student during your scheduled class meeting time. This will keep your students engaged, and the dialogue will be similar to walking around the studio and working with students individually in the traditional face-to-face modality. Another strategy is to coordinate students together in study groups. Coordinate 2 or 3 students together. Encourage them to virtually chat together while working during class sessions and during out-of-class studio sessions. Having workmates will encourage them to continue the community aspect of the traditional classroom and hopefully stay on task. I used Facebook as a class tool last semester. Though a bit antiquated in the eyes of my students, I created private Facebook groups for each class session. Assignments and YouTube video links were posted on the site, making them quickly accessible. Links to articles, artists, and techniques were also posted to the page. Students also contributed to the page. This format made getting content to students very easy and created a forum. For student interactivity, students were required to upload images and/or video of their progress each week. I did this to assist with the lost community aspect of our traditional modality. Students were asked to comment and add to the forum. Again, what I found most beneficial here was that it allowed an accessible place for students to see each other's work and to continue a somewhat social construct. Just to be upfront, and I doubt I'm alone here, I feel the switch to online formats is a hindrance to our programs. It loses some of the most important and sustainable components of our studio courses: peer relationships, studio dialogue, mentorship, community. It can put a damper on the development of friendships established in our classes and on our campus. Sharing ideas, suggesting alternative ways to look at things, helping your neighbor, group problem solving, chatting about life, body language, that subtle eye roll that speaks a plethora, and just deciphering together what the instructor just said. Our students do all these things while they work on their projects in a traditional studio setting. Our students learn to appreciate each other and a diversity of ways to think that is contingent to group learning. When our students leave our programs, they find that they have become a part of a bigger family, a supportive family, that can assist them to reach higher goals beyond graduation. I encourage all of you to find ways to develop and support the community aspect into your traditional hybrid and online courses. Thank you. Let's see if I can get out of there.
Thank you so much, David. Look forward to the question part of it in the discussion. I really appreciate your sharing details about what your experience has been like and what you're planning on doing this next term. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next in our panel discussion is Naomi J. Falk. She is an assistant professor at the University of South Carolina. And in addition to her multifaceted studio practice to help everyone facing the swiftly changing classroom environment, this past spring, she and Stacy Eisenberger began a project share platform. And this is available, so I encourage everyone to go on and continue to add to it. This is for art educators. It's www.whatdowedonowart, and she'll be talking about that during her presentation. And most recently, she has been prepping for her classes to go fully online now that her university made that shift 1 week ago. And so all of her experience is definitely going to be paying off both for her students, but also for the rest of us as we learn from her tonight. Naomi.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get this going here. Whoops. Okay. Play window. There we go. Hello, and thanks for inviting me today. I'm so glad to be a part of this conversation as we all figure out how to navigate teaching this year. And actually, my University of South Carolina is going face-to-face and hybrid, and just a portion, I think 30% of classes or so are currently online. So I am one of the few for that. In so many ways, preparing for fall classes has been a tremendous group effort. In May, like Leticia said, Stacy Eisenbarger and I were talking and we were like, what the bleepity bloop bloop do we do now? And so the Facebook groups had been really helpful, but info gets buried on there. And so we developed this website to be a dynamic, organized, and open resource for everyone. And we wanted to be able to stay adaptable. Like Leah Purpura says in her poem, sometimes a wobble is a stance. And I know I feel pretty wobbly off and on these days. So here's their current team: me, Stacy Eisenbarger, Evie Richner, and Claudia Morales McCain. And I'm so glad Evie and Claudia have decided to join us. We've got big plans for this place. And as the semester descends upon us, we could still use a little more help. So if you're interested, this is my plug here, in becoming a contributing editor, let me know. One of the pages we've been developing is the perspectives page. And for our first interview, Claudia talked with Michael Hall, who started the online art and design studio instruction in the age of social distancing Facebook group, which, that's a mouthful, which has now grown to over 15,000 members just since March. So many people are looking for help and community, like David was saying. We've also been gathering ideas in our collective brainstorm series. But the main feature of our site is our project share. This has only been possible through the generosity of all of you out there, and we're only just beginning. So keep those project ideas coming. Here are some of the categories. There are quite a few, and more. One of the sculpture-related projects on our site is Laura Mangiovi's Dinner and a Movie. She asked students to research a movie and then create sculptural dinner table setting or installation. Another is Michael Webster's Figure Hybrid project, considering how our bodies are sites of radical resistance and mythical narrative. He asks students to consider how our bodies, as simple carbon matter, correspond with our subjective experiences and realities. And then using alginate molds, students combine plaster casts of themselves with other materials. He asks them to consider what relationships does the body have to identity, personhood, and consciousness? And what are some differences between lived experience and an external viewer? And how are bodies shaped through environmental stress and individual choice? Also, how can sculpture affect our understanding of the body? Sita Marie's Artifacts project provides an impetus for students to write, research, and consider history as they imagine discovering a mysterious artifact as students walk in the woods, for real or not. And here are some artifact student examples. Meredith Starr introduces weird cuts to her students, and while the app isn't necessarily 3D, it does play with virtual augmented reality space and starts to feel 3D as you move around. It also introduces easy to use apps to students, and we have a bunch of student videos on the site with Meredith's project. Often, beginning students are more comfortable and familiar with 2D media, and sometimes have great difficulty starting to translate their visual research from 2D to 3D. They also have a hard time with abstraction. So I make a bunch of copies of an early project of their research images, and then ask students to cut them up old school analog collage and rearrange them to make hybrid forms. It's fun. And of course, I called them Franken collages because Frankenstein was made of a bunch of other people's parts. And here's the translation from one 2D collage to a 3D model using skewers and hot glue. And several other examples here. And then last semester, I asked students to go for a walk and document and interpret it through drawings and then sculpture. These are some of the models. It was based on choreographer Bill T. Jones's piece, Still Here. We watched his interview with Bill Moyers, and I asked students to use his process of walking his life in their work. This led to a pretty deep conversation about the paths we take and what directions we want to go from here and how to depict them, especially as the people Jones was working with were terminally ill. We also looked at work by Feresta Tusi, Michelle Illuminato, Dear Dada, Natalie Meebach, and others. And special thanks to Tanya Wiseman Davis, Myron Beasley, and Feresta Tusi for help with putting this project together. A lot of students have more and more been telling me more consistently that I want to make something that means something. And so several, a number of people have projects like this. The Trophy or Memorial Yet to Be Awarded project uses found objects along with metaphor and symbolism to champion what is empowering and long deserved, or someone or something not usually acknowledged. So my class read several object lesson essays and looked at works by a variety of people. Efrat Ayel, Doris Salcedo, Taiba Begum Lippi, and Fred Wilson are some. This sculpture here is the patron saint of indelicate women based on a found newspaper article that the student dug up. And the student disemboweled a clothes iron, a curling iron, and bedazzled the found figurine with the parts. This project is adapted from Susan Yehuda and Carolyn Willard's new book, Making and Being. Students interviewed people they live or work with and designed objects to benefit the group. Tyrone, there on the left, designed an abstract turtle door stop, and other students used other materials. I introduced them to Mesh Mixer and Tinkercad, for instance, but allowed students to make their own objects with whatever materials they preferred in the end. So to round things up, so many of us are having these conversations. What do we need? What do our students need? And what's next? That's not a new thing in some ways, although it feels certainly more pressing right now. And usually I push my students to make physically bigger and more expansive work, but moving online and facing a lot of unknowns, I'm going to shift the scale of the work we're making this year. So this may mean making tiny sculptures, but it also means conceptually expanding into more media and interactions I don't normally consider as often when we're in the classroom face to face. Also, how do students and I use where we live as living, working, and exhibition spaces? And being pretty green or blue to teaching online, and being this physically isolated, the way people have connected and supported and built new and reconnected with old communities has been really powerful, and I'm so grateful for everyone. We're making progress. So thank you. I couldn't do it without you all. Much appreciated. Dun, da, da.
I like the dun, da, da. Thank you so much, Naomi. That was so thorough, and letting us see not only some of the ways that you've been planning with the what do we do now .art, but also your own project assignments that what you've been doing and how you were responding to that. And that question, what do we need and what do the students need? And so I think that the way that you're giving and sharing allows you to also ask yourself that question and pose potential answers. So thank you so much. And moving to our third speaker this evening. Third speaker is Carol Penelope Lambert. She's a professor of sculpture at Alfred University, where she also directs the National Casting Center Foundry. And she has been recognized as in the top 3 of ISC's outstanding educators for both 2019 and 2020. Although she has been, I think, the most fortunate professor of all of us in that she's on sabbatical this fall. However, she has been instrumental at the same time in developing approaches for Foundry education safely, both face-to-face, hybrid, and at the home. And so the way that she's taken her experience, her recognition of multi ways of working with metal and with Foundry work, and allowing students to be able to continue to investigate and explore has been absolutely inspirational. And so I'm looking forward to hearing how she can share with us tonight. So Coral, sorry. Coral, if you would, just go ahead and screen share.
Mute. Okay, can you see the screen? Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on the panel. I really appreciate being part of this conversation. A lot of us have many concerns, especially in the studio arts, of how we can maintain the sort of experience that we're used to giving our students with a hands-on experience. My expertise is in foundry and metal sculpture, and I teach at Alfred University, which is a very hands-on, heavy equipment place, as well as conceptual work. So like everybody, we had 6 weeks of our students in person, and then all of a sudden we go from this to on screen. One of my main concerns when we initially went on screen was to maintain spontaneity and cross-pollination of ideas between peers. So I'm going to show you some of the projects that I did, mainly in my junior course. I think it's especially difficult for our upper level courses, our juniors and our seniors, when they want to be learning skills and using techniques as far as glass casting or clay, ceramic sculpture and metalworking. So I used Canvas, and my syllabi was all put on Canvas. Within Canvas is a conference tool called Big Blue Button. So we would meet in real time. Obviously there was no time to make demonstrations. So we met in real time, which was an issue for some students, but also it gave a structure. So every week you were still turning up for class at that time. I set up discussion boards for each assignment. I used SpeedGrader. I used the announcements to communicate with students, but also like David, I would be texting and Facebooking and emailing. I mean, this was a triage situation where the students had just disappeared after spring break and didn't come back. The nice thing about using Canvas is that it's still all up there, and I can retrieve the PDFs and images and videos as well as my syllabi. It was difficult, and the thing that really brought me through it was the resilience of the students. The students were totally amazing. They really rose to the occasion. And I think the fact that the students are actually coming back to university with so many uncertainties, it's like, this is really special. So we're pulling out all the stops, but our students are also pulling out all the stops, and just realizing that they really want to be here. And they're making the effort. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say about teaching from home and teaching students at home is learning to embrace these different kind of interruptions. So giving permission for the integration of students' interests that don't usually come into the classroom. They're not normally part of the coursework, but now everyday life and school life is taking place in the same place, so they're more harder to separate. I think this is an interesting aspect to develop, a more holistic approach to teaching or to education in collaboration with the students, so it's not so teacher-centric model. We're teaching from our homes as well. So embracing these sort of interruptions and new dynamics is kind of fun. Some of the students were able to take their sculptures that they had cast home with them. The first project I actually did was a research project, and that was really great because the first project was really technical based. they made a PowerPoint. We were able to test all of the technology and see if they could share their screens and get comfortable with communicating in that manner. So we did the research presentations. It also made them more, responsible for bringing something to class. So it wasn't all on me bringing things to class. So the first project was a home patina. If they didn't have their metal casting, they had to find some metal. So they became hunter, scavenger, researcher, digging around, and only using household chemicals like lemon cleaner, vinegar, salt. We've got some wonderful results. And Tara Thomas, the one on the left there, she did a lot of experiments with green tea, which is actually a Japanese patina, and ended up with a whole plethora of different jugs and jars of green tea, kind of like this strange laboratory at home. One thing about asking students to go hunt for metal is that it came up with another aspect of the project is like identifying the metal. They would find silver-plated metal, nickel-plated, chrome-plated, and so that's something that normally we're handing them the metal. This is bronze, and you're working with bronze or you're working with iron. So they would find all sorts of things. The wheelbarrow is full of metal that was found in the backyard of Emily's backyard, and she called it a treasure trove. So these, it's a very poignant time to teach about recycling, reuse, upcycling, sustainability. During the pandemic, I noticed that people were fixing what they have rather than buying new, repairing. At the hardware stores, they're not as full, the shelves are empty. It's not always going to be as bountiful. So this project came more about looking and seeing and appreciating what one has and how to utilize it. It became about healing, mending, caring, nurturing the rust. So in a way, this is a wonderful moment to re-envision and enhance our curriculum. I say enhance as there is a lot of pressure right now for faculty to completely rewrite the curriculum. I think it's absolutely crucial to reevaluate, but look at it in a way that you're also kind to yourself. Enhancing and augmenting your strengths, especially if you've many years of teaching in the classroom. You may be doing things already, but need to critically assess and root out the priorities regarding what should and what can be taught. This led me to the next project, which was going to be, if we were in real time, was going to be the iron pour, and they would learn how to make sand molds and things, and run a furnace. So I started looking at appropriate and sustainable technology. They missed out a lot with actually making things, so I asked them to research the process and design a furnace. The appropriate technology is actually a movement that encompasses technological choice, and the application of that in a small scale is just like what Naomi was saying about the scale shifts. The book that Schumacher wrote is Small is Beautiful, and actually you can get that as a PDF. It was written in 1973. Appropriate technology actually grew into sustainable technology. And Schumacher asserts that such technology is described in the book Small is Beautiful. It tends to promote values of health, beauty, and permanence in that order. And I think when we're being, in a pandemic and in a virus situation, you're also in a very stressful situation, and you need to work in a different way where you're healing or mending and thinking about health and beauty and enjoyment in the arts. So this is an ancient furnace from Africa, and then that's a furnace that I built in Latvia of earth and iron, the volcano furnace. So these are some of the student designs, the pandemic dream furnace designs. I did do a slide talk online about the history of the furnace and the history of metal casting. And also my technician, my Foundry technician, helped me search the internet for appropriate demos. And I think also if we're online, we need help with finding demos. We can't create all of our own demos as well as teach online and create course content. And I think that's something, thinking about being kind to ourselves. It's like there are a lot of demos out there, but we need to steer our students to look at the safe ones and to look at the ones that are going to be more educational. So my technician spent a lot of time sifting through the web and the internet, and we have some of those demos on Canvas that I'll eventually put up on the Alfred Foundry blog so that people can see them. The interesting result about some of the furnace designs, my favorite one actually is the chocolate melter, is that they're multifunctional. They function in a way to bring people together. So we spoke about the occasion that these would be fired up. It's not really just about melting something and producing an object. It's actually a performance itself. So you know, hopefully some of these will get built one day. So some future, you know, that was all kind of triage in the spring. And I think, you know, this semester, although I'm not teaching, I'm still thinking about it, and I will share some of these on Naomi's website, but these are some future online sculpture Foundry assignments that can be done with mail or with providing limited tools like a riveter, and then they have to find materials. I think there's an interesting conversation about sharing, about providing materials to students, or they go and hunt for them themselves, or providing tools, but they might give them a hammer, but they don't necessarily need a hammer, or they've got a hammer. So 2 courses that I have taught over the years that I think will become more relevant now is Environmental Foundry, which examines the making of sculpture using ancient metal casting techniques from diverse cultures, from Japan and India and Africa, Mesoamerica. That is something that I also would use sustainable technology and materials like cow dung, beeswax. Another course that I would teach, and I think this could be a hybrid course. Another course would be Digital Foundry or Digital Sculpture, where files can be emailed. And I've taught that before, most recently about a year or so ago with digital sculptor Paul Hyam. And we used a lot of free programs and tried to make it more from a maker culture point of view, where the student doesn't need a really high-powered computer, and then to hook up with someone. I think, you know, some of the things that David and Naomi have said so far about a community and collaborating, like using everybody's strengths to get through this. I think this might be my last slide. Oh no, sorry, I've got 2. So if we are going online, we can't teach everything online. We need to have support from our organizations or from our universities to augment the online experience with hands-on experience. So whether that be, I mean, we're always looking at internships and apprenticeships and workshops, but they are fewer now because some organizations are not doing their intern programs. So I think thinking further afield into, you know, linking up with industry and placing students with industry for a couple of weeks to do some grinding and metal or hands-on stuff. It's like, we need to think outside of the box to get that hands-on experience. We're very fortunate at Alfred University. We actually already have a program called the APEX program, which is applied and experiential learning. And I was able to send one of my students to Pittsburgh, to the Rivers of Steel Iron Casting Conference. And they had a 10-day intensive experience of sand molding and that. So, you know, we need to be able to have that kind of support to get our students engaged like that. So yeah, this is only temporary, right? But one of my big questions is, how liable are we, even just talking about some of these ideas of patinas or building things, you know, you're firing the imagination, and how liable are we when we're sharing the history of sculpture and what is possible when the students are working at home. If something happens, who is responsible? So thank you so much. That's it.
Thank you so much, Coral. Appreciate it. And I am following the blog spot for Alfred now to make sure that when those get posted, I will be the first one to be downloading those. Thank you for doing all that work and sharing it. I like that last emoji person wearing the.
Yeah, that's the outfit that one can wear on the first day of class.
That's one way to connect, right? Hello, Kristen. I see you popping in. Hi.
Yeah, just to remind everybody who's watching live, I'm ready to transfer your questions from Facebook comments to our panelists. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and write them in the comments. I will ask them for you.
Excellent. Thank you for the reminder. So yes, definitely have those questions coming. And we have our final speaker this evening for the panel discussion is Nyasha Madamombe. She's a Zimbabwean visual artist who's right now starting her 3rd year of her MFA at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. When developing this panel, we recognize that grad students have a very unique position as they are both between the student and the faculty point. And so helping us to understand as this discussion is going on, their point of view as far as students, but also as they're going into the classroom in some cases for the first, maybe second time at best. And so understanding her vantage point, we thought would be a very helpful one. So I'm so glad that she was able to join us tonight. A little bit more about her. She is a double recipient of the Mid-South Sculpture Alliance Scholarship for Outstanding Student Achievement. So she received that award both in 2019 and 2020. This fall, in addition to working towards her MFA thesis show that will be happening in the spring, she's also teaching 3D foundations and she's assisting a Foundry class. And so she has a lot of different hats she's going to be wearing while also obviously working through the situation that we are all in. And so with that, Nyasha, if you'd be so kind to take over the screen.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I can figure this out. All right, so as I was saying, thank you for this opportunity to just be able to give a perspective on some of the students' experiences. I know that my experience is not every student's experience, but I just wanted to start off by giving a little bit of a background on my work, just so I can give an idea of how I work and how I've been working through COVID since this pandemic happened, and kind of what my approach has been and is, and obviously still working out a lot of things and figuring out things and being as flexible as possible in order to move forward, I guess, and get work going and just being able to cope in this situation. So I'm just going to be going through some of my work and talking about it and what inspires my work and things like that. All right, so again, as Leticia introduced me, I'm a student at UT, and I'm also teaching at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I'm a sculptor and a digital artist. A lot of my work investigates like human connections and my relationship with my present world through like the ancient Zimbabwean world of my ancestors. And being that this world is in the past and I'm at the present moment also separated from my home country, my work continuously exists in two parts, where I am from and where I'm at right now, which is basically kind of created like a hybrid world, which is very interesting considering that the situation that we're in and the fact that we've had to end up going online. So because I'm separated from my family in a way, kind of prepared me for coping with art making in a time of COVID. And because I can't be together in person with my family, I have had I guess, across the continent, socially distanced and online relationship with my family and friends. And for the past 2 years, we've had to come up with creative ways to stay close and stay in touch and make things just more interesting as we're working, as we're, you know, communicating, chatting, and catching up and making sure we're staying in each other's lives. So for instance, a very close friend of mine from back home came up with a game we called Picture Time, where I would text the phrase picture time at any time in the day. And they had to send me an image of whatever they were doing at the time. And I had to do the same. So it, of course, because I'm in art school, it ended up happening that they got a lot of images of my in-process work and me in studio. And there was a lot of images like this of me in a mask, carving away at something or working at something. And it's basically, I feel like this is kind of where sculptors are before and during COVID. We're still in those masks and just trying to make the best of what we have. And so yeah, he would end up getting a lot of these images of me in the studio and me making in-process shots of my work as I was making my work. So, and I think as art students, COVID has really drastically limited our access to spaces we were used to in order to, you know, to create, access to tools, workshops, and our studios, as well as access to our peers and audience, and even the spaces that we show our work. So you kind of start to think about how else can I create my work? What other materials can I use if I can't make that clay sculpture? If I can't fire it, if I can't have access to the tools that I'm used to, how else can I start making my work? I feel like I've been very, very lucky in that as a graduate student at UT, I still had access to my studio when COVID started, and even during this whole period, I've still had access to my studio, and I've still had access to the workshops. And when all this began, like, our professors were really, really flexible, and they were very helpful in trying to figure out how to make this transition as less stressful as possible. And so a lot of the work that we ended up producing and creating, they were very flexible with it. And I found that for me also as an instructor at the time, I was able to pick up on that and kind of work with my own students in the same way and be as flexible as possible in terms of the projects that we had set and the what was expected of the students and what they ended up producing, but still make sure that they're being challenged and they're still making the most amazing work that they can still make. I think though that one of the biggest problems that we had was, well, at least for myself, and I'm pretty sure for my students as well, was not being able to be in that community, as a lot of you have already previously brought up, being able to be in a community, in a space with people that you can immediately bounce ideas off of and talk about your work and get feedback about your work. And I think that was one of the most difficult parts about it, not being in that space with everybody. But I think there was ways we started to figure out how to still do that using Google Drive, putting our images up on the internet and having everybody else looking at it and talking about it and finding different ways to be able to give feedback to work. And I think the other thing was also that not just for myself and how I was thinking in how can I make my work more impactful if someone has to view it on the internet and not in person, where there's certain things that, as you all know, there's just something about viewing an art piece in person. So I started to just think about what are those things that I can do in terms of making my work have more impact for people when they view it. And so in my own work, like using my background as a digital artist, I started to look at old work, thinking about the new work that I have, and how I can use that. So like, for instance, this sculpture, the stone sculpture that I made, I started to think about what I would be able to do with this in the digital realm. So I kind of sculpted it in 3D in the digital realm, and I just started to think that I can actually expand on the story of this piece and the ideas that I had that I feel like maybe don't come through the piece since it's inanimate. And so I've started to make some of my old work into digital work, and now I can animate it and add stuff to it and create it in a different way that I didn't think of before. And just also thinking about, so this stone piece, I just basically am creating it in a digital world, and this is just different angles of it and what that looks like. But I'm very excited just thinking about what I can actually really do with this now that we have to spend a lot of time at home, and on my computer. And so this is kind of like the way I've been thinking about some of this work. And then also just thinking about work that I've made before, where I've, for instance, used objects in my work, like this musical instrument, tambira. I've used it in my work and it's just been there. But now that I cannot, now that people cannot at this present moment view it in person, I've started to think about, okay, can I actually use the sound of the musical instrument in my work? And how do I, how do I think more on that work and make it have more impact? And so just thinking about sounds and making all these other, bring other elements to my work. But basically all this is to say that the difficulties that the pandemic has created, I would like to encourage like my peers to look at this as an opportunity to approach the traditional ideas that we have about making our work in a hybrid way, and the way in which we communicate and support each other, and kind of find the silver lining in all of this, and figure out how else we can look at our work, how else we can look at our community as artists, how else we can look at still staying connected and still keeping that same energy and still pushing and making our work in ways that we wouldn't have thought about if we were still able to have access to everything that we had access to before. But yeah, that's kind of basically my thought process as a student. And I really, really do appreciate the fact that our professors were able to be flexible with us because I know that when when other students, the grad students that just graduated, when they had to do their show, it was difficult for them watching them trying to figure out how they're going to show their work, how it's going to happen. It was really difficult. And I feel like a lot of us really came together to help each other out and just find a way to make it work and support each other, even if it was virtually going to your virtual show or showing up for each other in any way that we could. That's kind of like yeah, my take on this. But and yeah, that's me. Yeah, thank you.
You, Nyasha, thank you so much for sharing and for letting us into some of the ways that you responded as a student, and then also hearing about how you took that information that your faculty gave you, how they responded and encouraged, gave you a lot of freedom, how you turned that around and modeled that for your students too. So thank you so much. And that concludes the presentation part. And so I would really enjoy if people can continue to stay on, and we will move to having more of a discussion. I don't know if any questions have been showing up on the Facebook Live section or not, but while we wait for that, one question that has been sort of rattling around in my head, given the way that all of you have linked back to the way that we handle the process of moving online and trying to create opportunities for handling. Not every student handles it as well as Nyasha just described, right? And so how do we respond? Or how have you responded, or how would you encourage people to think about responding when you have a student who feels like they've been cheated? They've been cheated out of a traditional studio experience. Maybe they rely heavily on tools, and that's what they've been hoping for, or that's what they've been banking on, and now they can't as easily, or possibly not at all. How have you been handling that, or how would you encourage people to handle it moving forward? David.
I had a few students that sort of like were in that slump of like a project that, you know, wasn't quite what we were going into casting, and like the project that I gave them was quite a different material. And what I did is sort of like what Coral was talking about, making it look, you know, or think about the future. It's this problem that we're doing now could be a pattern for casting if we wanted to do that later on. And you looking at it as an opportunity to develop it that way. Obviously, I mean, I think the things that we're doing in some of our, you know, I'm teaching in an undergrad program, that a lot of the projects that they're doing is basically learning the materials anyway. And I think encouraging them that they understand that what they're doing now may not be, you know, something that they're going to be showing in the future. It's a stepping stone to get them in that direction to where they get better at their practice and better at the concepts behind them and stuff like that.
Nice. And so, yes, please go ahead, Coral.
We had several students obviously teaching Foundry. You know, it is very process-based. It is very much about the whole pouring of metal and making molds and things. So I had a student that I didn't hear from, you know, and I emailed, we did the announcements, who didn't turn up for conferencing, and so I just called them and had a conversation and said, well, I'm going to drop out. And I said, well, what are you doing? Like, what are your plans for the future? Let's think about the big picture. And I think a lot of that is having conversations with us. And if they're not comfortable with talking with us, maybe someone else can reach out. But I think just being available and making that extra effort to reach out. And I found out that they were building a glass furnace in the backyard. And I said, that's going to count. You can use that. Send me some pictures and we'll be fine, you know. So I'm actually not sure where they are now, but hopefully they will be coming back for their senior year. And I think we do actually have to be realistic. If we're saying we're offering this kind of class and it's not going to turn out like that, maybe people do have to withdraw or come back another semester. There are the realities of it. So I think when we're starting out with this semester, which has got a lot of uncertainties, if we're honest and saying and prepared that, you know, this is what you're coming into, and being, you know, upfront about it, because, you know, it is a reality. You're not going to be doing certain things.
Naomi, please.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about too is you know, how I'm sure all of us have conversations with each other and with students about how everything is defining what the parameters are. you know, and so we set parameters for ourselves for nearly every decision that we make in life. And so, you know, coming up with creative ways are like actually figuring out what the parameters are with what you have to work with, are really like a basic way of like figuring out, well, what do I do next? You know, like, what do I have to work with? What might be possible? Okay, what's next? So yeah, setting parameters and figuring out what those are.
I have a related question from the comments section about kind of questioning what kind of diversity of tactics we have to help students who might not have great access to the internet, who are still maybe willing, and also trying to reframe kind of what we've been talking about in sense of looking at it as an opportunity rather than something that's been lost, switching from, you know, access to the studios to being distanced. So if anybody has any ideas or thoughts on that.
I mean, I think one of the first things that comes to mind is how, like if you go really analog and send things through the mail, like I've been doing, I think 4 or 5 mail art based collaborations with people this summer, slowly, and have been thinking about doing something like that with students. And Coral, you did. Whoops.
You muted there for a moment, Naomi. Can you repeat that last bit?
So I was just saying, Coral, your project with the 2 wax balls was basically that too. So finding fun ways to do collaborations could be helpful, although, you know, it slows communication down. But, you know, having good old texting and FaceTime and, you know, like phone calls also can work for real, yeah.
I think one of the things too, I mean, I'm not sure that I'm getting the whole question here, but there are students that don't have access all the time. And, you know, finding a way that, you know, if they can download, like for me, I try to give them the whole class in that folder. So they have it, like they could work ahead if they really wanted to. So basically they could download those files and stuff like that and have it there. I had students that just wrote down all their assignments too, or not wrote down the actual assignments, but wrote down all the deadlines by hand, I guess, or just so they'd have it handy so they could sort of follow the regimen. Though they were still texting, they were still chatting with me and stuff like that because they had the ability to. I think similar things could be done for those that are in that sort of disparity.
I think it's important to let the students know that there are other forms of communication ahead of time, or else we lose them. So say, yeah, it's okay, just a phone. You don't need to FaceTime, or we don't need to see if just call on the phone. If that's in the syllabus ahead of time, then they know that's a channel.
I have another question, and there are a couple of tools that might be useful in terms of like group chats that I'm thinking of for people who might not have internet. GroupMe is a really popular one among my students. Just for educators who might not want to share their phone number, you can use GroupMe. And then here's another question from the comments from Joe Bigley. He says, in intro to our 3D design courses, I found that students are really apprehensive to experiment. With the resourcefulness necessary with distance learning, are there any strategies that come to mind that help students timid to play and experiment and to shed the expectations of product rather than process?
I like to use like projects that when I have a project, basically you've got an introductory component where basically it's sort of like really quick, get this done in class in a 30-minute session, or, you know, an hour session, get this part done. Sometimes that opens them up just to start playing with the materials and stuff like that, if that's the issue. And also the concepts, you know, like quickly you've got to make, you know, for one of my projects is a simple marble catcher. You've got to take a piece of wire and you've got to be able to catch a marble without touching it with your hand. And you do that in 30 minutes, all right? Or maybe 3 of them. And really sort of like get them engaged in sort of a goal. And then I think it will open them up to start playing with the materials in different ways. And seeing, because once you start playing with the material, you start seeing its ability to transform into an object or whatever it might be.
Coral, yes, please.
Making things with food is always fun and less kind of serious. And so you make something with food, and you got to make a sculpture of food, and then you got to eat it, or something like that. Like the other thing is making something that you are then going to destroy immediately. That's another project.
Type of bye-bye art. Yes, Naomi.
I do a variety of those things too, and I've started, even on the first day, have them go for a walk or find some object that they find interesting or boring for some reason, and then they come back and they make it out of a variety of materials. So make found object replicas, and they can play with all sorts of materials. So like if you choose a rock and you make it out of wire, and then you make it out of rubber bands, and then you can compare and contrast what the materials do and say. And I usually have them do at least 5 and sometimes more throughout the semester. So it's like a fun warm-up thing.
Nice. David.
Another one is just introducing process as a form of art. One of my assignments had been years ago, just doing 1,000 things, one thing 1,000 times, and continually doing that over and over again. And that could have been any kind of process. I had one student that jumped rope 1,000 times outside. And what made it more engaging was the story that the student told, because they didn't have video of it. They didn't have anything that was tangible. What was so interesting is that her sister and her sister's friends came over and said, "So what are you doing?" I'm jumping rope 1,000 times, she says. And then basically they want to do it too. So like they jumped some of her 1,000 times. So it was awesome. It sort of like engaged them and started thinking about community and how, just the act of doing something can be art.
And jumping rope is automatically physical distancing because you can't get too close, right? Or you get like hit. So it's safe and process based. Nice. And that exercise thing that we're having a problem with, that, as far as like sitting in front of your computer too much. So focusing on process, and you have other benefits. But nice, good thoughts and sharing. And Kristen, I think you have another question.
Yes, I have a question about deadlines from Kimberly Elizabeth. So how did you all handle project deadlines when everything went online? Did the process of grading change for anyone? And I would actually really like to know what, I was about to say, I want to know what Nyasha has to say about this.
Yeah, for sure. We had to, again, become really flexible, and project deadlines changed, grading process changed. And so where projects were supposed to be, say, a 2-week project, and it was supposed to be a certain percentage of the grade, the project was reduced to maybe half of the time, to like a week instead of 2 weeks, and made simpler, and the project was made simpler. And so because I think when we went online, for my students, our class, we were just about to begin a clay project and a plaster project. And so we didn't have access to that anymore. And so we had to completely change the project. And then it became like, in order to make it more interesting, include drawing and sculptural. So where students were encouraged to, one project was to like make an assemblage, and then make a drawing of that assemblage, and then change the tone of the piece by adding light to it, or something like that, and then redrawing it. And then that became something that was at least good enough for them to work with within a week, and still get a grade for a percentage grade for it. But yeah, we definitely changed the percentages that the that particular project had and the time frame that it was supposed to be made in.
Thank you, Nyasha. Coral.
I didn't give deadlines. I gave projects, and I didn't even, I said, you can choose between the projects as well. So you didn't have to do all of the projects. You could really do whatever you could do in your environment. So I didn't, my expectations were, yes, they would turn up every week and we would communicate, and they would, didn't, you know, I think I gave 5 different options of project outlines, and they could start with stuff. And then if they really got into, say, the Rust Residue project and did that 5 weeks, that was fine. They didn't have to do a furnace. So, you know, it was very, very flexible, but they were there listening to the Slack talks and the information and sharing the demos, but then they were carrying on with whatever project they were really engaged with, or that they could actually do in their environment and with the stuff that they had and the time and the technology, and, you know, just using that appropriate technology.
Mm-hmm. David.
I broke my projects down into steps, and basically there was like deadlines for each step. And I also lengthened them to where they were able to get to it. And those had pros and cons. I had some students that really shined with that structure, and others that just sort of lagged behind. I think it was just the normal things that we see in our classes. But I found it quite interesting in the projects that were, you know, given that more time. And then they had those, but they had deadlines to sort of come in with the components of the parts and stuff like that. And it was, you know, good stages though for me. At the same time, for online, I was able to give feedback at those stages and help them with what they needed to do next.
Nice, Naomi. Yes,
I did some similar things. I ended up giving multiple project options when we shifted to online, so that there was more of a choice. Totally kind of the same thing, depending on what materials and things that people had available, and, you know, what the students' interests were in things and what they felt like they could do. I had in process deadlines to, you know, post to discussion boards and things. I did not have good luck with discussion boards at all. So many of my students just didn't do it, and they didn't show up. But, you know, we were also in this like super emergency situation, so I really gave a lot of latitude and just would try and get a hold of the students in other, you know, other ways or later on, and that did help some. But I ended up shifting all of the projects to being due at the end of the semester, and I don't know that I would do that this time around. But, you know, with the last few weeks of class and just giving students the time that they needed to do things, that felt like a good idea. But I think I learned that we all need deadlines. So
I assume then this semester you have, at least on the plan right now, there's deadlines?
yeah, definitely.
Nyasha.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it was difficult to be too flexible, and some students really did need like specific deadlines and guidelines, and so that worked for them. So I think it depends on your class and your students. And I had a pretty medium-sized class, but I try to get, like, as before, when we started the semester, before when we were still in person, I try to really get to know each individual student. And so when we went online, that helped me try to figure out what each person needed and how to communicate with them, and how to approach them, and what, you know, and make sure that I was open enough for them to be able to communicate with me as well, and reach out and with whatever they needed. But yeah, I also, opening up a platform for students to come in and discuss work was a bit difficult to have students be able to do that. But I had an online Google folder where each project was dropped into that folder and all the students had access to everyone's folders, because I found that that helped them see what, because they couldn't, because usually in an in-person class, you're seeing what everybody's doing. And that kind of, if you're a little bit lost, it helps you see what's happening. So all of my students had access to each other's folders, and they could see each other's projects and see how everybody was doing. And I think it kind of helped them as well if they were a little bit lost in maybe if I didn't explain the project or they didn't understand the project as well, that I found that really helped them, being able to see each other's work as well.
Nice. Yes, David.
I did a similar thing with Facebook, and then they had to comment on the posts that were created on Facebook by the students. One thing that I found that, I mean, I don't know how you guys did it, but I just sort of limited it to where like they only chose, they would only have to choose 3 pieces to talk about as an individual. And I would hope that they got everybody, that there were some people that were, didn't get a full 3 people talking about their work, and then others that got more. But it seemed like, not overwhelming them with too many things to talk about, just sort of like a formal critique. We never have that much time to sort of get through everybody in the class talking about one single piece. But a few people talking about it really helped out.
I just had one real quick thing. When everybody's talking, I was thinking about, like, we're talking kind of about inspiration and accountability. And so, as sharing is really important, and building that community, and inspiration and accountability works for professors too.
Have you found any particular ways that you've either found opportunity to keep that inspiration and flexibility for yourself too, or is it something that you've been finding ways to encourage others?
Well, I think, thinking about that, the things I've been mailing back and forth between other artists, like, you kind of go, oh, I need to get on that, and send stuff out. But I also really liked the idea of, like, texting people pictures, like, what am I up to right now? Oh, what are you up to right now? Like, oh, okay, I better get back to doing something. So, and it's fun too, just like Nyasha was saying earlier, and it helps, like, feel like you're connected to people.
Back to that, we too are used to being in a community-based situation where you see someone else working, you see what they're up to, and it's motivating. And so the same way that we want that for our students, I think you're right. We might all steal Nyasha's, what was it called again? Picture time? Yeah, picture time. And so thank you for sharing that story and that experience, how you've been doing that for 2 years, and we can learn from that now to keep our own selves motivated. Kristen, any additional questions coming from that end?
No additional questions. I think people are really happy that we're sharing so many great ideas. I've seen a lot of really positive comments. Lots of people engaging, talking maybe about different resources. Yeah, no new questions though. So if anybody has any other thoughts about what makes a successful online sculpture experience, yes, please. I'm listening too, right? About this.
Yes, Naomi.
I think the main thing that I'm really going to start with at the very beginning is teaching them how to, and letting them practice how to photograph, how to document their work, and how to successfully get it so that all of us can see it too. Because we had some debacles this past spring, and it worked out overall. But really paying attention, and talking about why it's relevant to, like, take process images of the work that you're doing, and why those should look pretty good just in case, And, you know, then you have a really nice portfolio document of the progress that you've made. So that's one of the first things that I'll be doing, just to, you know, let's get it rolling. So.
I would just add that I think that that's a common thread for all of us. I mean, I faculty members and myself sort of frustrated with the image quality that the students were creating and stuff like that. And one of the things that I mentioned in my presentation was just having those type of things happening from 3D design all the way through is a big deal, because I remember when I was applying to graduate school, it was thrown at me like, get images, get this all together, da-da-da. But I think if they, you know, practice makes perfect. If they're practicing it throughout the curriculum, they get it. They understand why. I think the difficult thing too was that, you know, they were at home. They didn't have the setup that I have set up at school. You know, I've already got it set up to where they can sort of take their images in that correct fashion, and I'm right there to help them. It didn't always work out that way when they were at home.
Absolutely, because some people might not have the right opportunity or situation. Yes, Coral.
We were always taught to photograph our sculpture work outside on a grey day. That is the absolute best light to photograph a three-dimensional object, because you don't get so many shadows. It's got to be a grey day. But I think that is really important, because a lot of students seem to think that they better wait until they make their better work, and their better work might be the work they're making right now. So just imparting that we're always making to make our best work. That's why we keep making sculpture. We keep making because we haven't made it yet. But yeah, I think that is really important, especially if you find yourself suddenly having to go online and leave your studio, leave all the work there. It's like photograph it as soon as possible while you have it, and all the way through. And I think that students will get more savvy about that, especially if they have to share it on, you know, like Nyasha's Picture Time, or on a blog, or on Facebook, or on Canvas, or on all of the different platforms that we've got.
David.
I like what Coral said about, like, we're always working to get to that new best piece or whatever in that fashion, and taking photographs in the process too. I mean, like, as students were making their work and giving those process images, I was like getting new ideas. I'm like, why am I doing these multiple steps? I should just stop them right now. But I want them to go through the whole process, because there were so many beautiful moments in those creations, and that, you know, a lot of times they don't get it just yet. They don't see it yet, and maybe those process images will allow them to look back and say, wait a minute, that's a whole, you know, when they get older, they get more mature, and wow, that's a cool idea. I can use that somewhere.
Wait, that was one too many sequence. I need to go like 2 days back, right? And so, but you don't know if you don't have all those process images of what was too much sanding or what was too dark of stain. And so, yeah, if you have that process, you can build it up. The next one you might stop, you know, 20 minutes sooner. So nice, good points. And Kristen, I believe we have one last question.
Yes, I'm going to go for the question from the commenter, not from the MSA admin account. Sorry, MSA. This is kind of a quick question. It's easy to lose focus and energy being online all day. How long would the duration of your online classes be? And I guess I'm assuming maybe she's talking about her synchronous, the synchronous sections of your online classes.
I think I haven't quite decided how things are going to go, or maybe I'll try a couple of different things. But one version is to hold the whole class time via Zoom, but just do like a beginning intro, like demo-y or discussion part at the, 20-30 minutes, and then have the rest work time, and then students can go and do whatever. They can turn their cameras off, they can work, and then we could have a check-in time at the end of the session. that doesn't work for everyone in the situation that we're in. So I don't know if it will work for my students or not. Otherwise, I was thinking I would do as much as I could asynchronously, and then set up like meetings like with the group, and then as well as like have virtual office hours with individual meetings scheduled, and that kind of thing. So I don't know, like what I did in the spring didn't work, so I am up for good suggestions.
David.
Yeah, that was a hard one for me too. I did really short, sort of just commentary at the beginning of class, and then I just let them go. And then I actually went back and started doing demo stuff and getting, stuff that I could upload or editing and stuff like that. This semester, I think what I'm going to try to do, if we do that type of, if we go online like that, is maybe sort of create a schedule during the class that I can communicate with them individually. I just like the idea that, it's sort of like, back in the studio when you're walking around from student to student and seeing where they're at and what they're doing. I don't know if it'll work. I'm just going to give it a try.
I guess the lessons learned are similar to Naomi's idea, where I think I would definitely keep an online lecture maybe only 30 minutes, and then have a break and then check in, or have studio time where people go off and then you come back. But I was finding during that time, I was at the computer 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. I think again, it's going back to what I was saying in my talk about being kind to ourselves and looking after our well-being as well as our students' well-being, and having a collaboration with them, like what works for them, what works for us. I mean, obviously there is information and education being imparted or exchanged, but just thinking about how long we do have to actually sit at the computer. And maybe the computer can be on in the background and you can be working away on something and just pop back.
David.
I would add though that, my advanced students that, I've got a good relationship with and stuff like that, they really enjoyed just sort of sitting there, like and working and having a conversation with Zoom on with us all together. It was just a different dynamic. I think they just, they relished in that sort of conversation, or just like sometimes dead silence as we sort of just sat there and worked and stuff like that. And I sort of like, just being a part of that community again too. But it's like Coral's saying, we got to save ourselves. I mean, there was times that I was, I wasn't at the computer, but I've got a watch that tells me when things come in, and basically got my iPhone right there with me, and students are texting, sending images, saying, how do I do this? How do I do that? What do I do next, etc. And it does keep us up pretty late if you want to follow that path. I don't know. I don't know if it's healthy for us.
That's true. Having that do not disturb turned on your phones and such every so often, about a certain point in time in the day, might be a good way to save self, because if not, all those little dings will keep coming in, right? But we want to be there and we want to be able to help. I know I'm moderating, but one thing that I just actually finished teaching a summer term class, and one thing that made a difference for me was I made 2 surveys, one that I gave out at the first third of the semester, and then a second one at the second third. It was through Blackboard. It was anonymous, and it was just like 5 or 6 multiple choice short answer questions about how the students were experiencing, how they were doing. And that made a difference for me to find out whether or not I was on target and what else was I missing, where were my blind spots. And I made some shifts. And so just because I had a thought, I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be great. Sometimes we find out from them also. And they might not be too shy to say it out loud. And so I found, making sure that they had a room where they could also say it to me. But that might help as far as how do we adjust. Any last comments before we sign off today? Well, thank you all so very much. Kristen? I saw you unmuted. Any last? Oh yeah. Oh, we have a big last thought. Yes. Please go.
Yes, so all of these talks are going to be archived, and you can find them either through going to our YouTube channel, which is just Mid-South Sculpture Alliance, or you can find them on our website. Thank you so much to our panelists. We really, really appreciate you for joining us tonight and taking the time and the effort to share what you've been doing. And thank you again to Leticia for moderating. We really, really appreciate having you here as well. I'd also like to do a special thanks out to Melissa Yes for being our Osprey on the curtain, Lauren Coach for her advice, and the board members who made this possible in such a short amount of time, including Stephanie Logan, Stacey Holloway, as well as our managing director, Bags McKelvey. So I'm really grateful to all the people who were able to put this together. Follow us on social media, become a member. You can become a member by going to the midsouthsculpture.org website and just join. Please join us. Come be a part of us. Be one of us. Yes. And
yes, yes.
and I'm really looking forward to our next panel. So see you all around the bend.
See you all.